Hello and welcome to the Miraculous Lightworkers channel, your go-to place for all things about Lightworkers and enlightenment. Today I'm going to be reading the October 29th entry from the Daily Meditations for Practicing A Course in Miracles by Karen Casey. Links to where you can purchase a copy are in the description box below, and also more information can be found at acim.org. So, today's entry is about hurtful actions. Opening statement says, as God's children, we cannot be hurt. If we are God's children, thus can't be hurt, how are the injuries we or others experience explained? What about the abandonment we suffer when a spouse leaves or a friend rejects us? We can all recall times when either we or someone else close to us suffered grave physical or emotional injuries. Aren't we all God's children? Of course we are. And yet, every moment that we let the ego take command of our lives, we are not protected from harm. The ego knows only attack. Thus, it initiates only attack. The hurts pile up and more hurts are instigated. It's a vicious cycle that is as short-lived as we will it to be. Our job is to seek an alternative to any ego-inspired action and let God, through the Holy Spirit, inspire a loving approach. It's a simple solution to an aggravating situation. Closing affirmation says, if I feel hurt by someone's actions today, I'll seek another way to see the experience. There is one always. This is probably one of the most challenging concepts in the Course, which is that as God's children, we cannot be hurt, especially if we've come from situations, childhoods, especially where there was any sort of trauma, abandonment, etc. Those things, when we're in what seems to be a vulnerable state, seem to impact us for our entire lives. So trying to get a hold of this concept can kind of be a real affront, and a lot of that has to do with how our ego responds to it, because when we're in those formative years, our ego is developing and creating the story of our lives and why we are who we are, why we're justified for being any way that we are. I myself came from an upbringing where there was a lot of things going on in my childhood that one would deem hurtful actions. This is why I teach the Course today, I think, is probably coming from that place where I needed to understand what had happened and why I had grown to be the person that I have become. I, for much of my life, would have said that I was hurt in my childhood for multiple reasons. But the Course has shifted my perception of what occurred, essentially. So when we're busy doing a lot of body identification stuff, which is normally what we do when we're in our formative years, we're looking at what it's like to be in the body, in the physical presence on this planet. There's a lot of lack and limitation that is associated with that. And we aren't spirit identified. It's kind of what it comes down to. The Course can be really ethereal in nature, and yet it's not New Age. A lot of people think of the Course as being very New Age. It's not so much New Age as it is, this is the information, the wisdom that our ancestors originally were perpetuating and saying, look, we're spirit. When we leave this world, our spirit lives on, this kind of thing, which is not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination. So what's going on here then is that when we see people, so for instance, Most of us have seen someone who was in extreme physical detriment for some reason. And it can be really traumatizing because our ego is the one that responds to that. And because it's almost as if it's happening to us. We personalize what's happening with another person, and it sort of it stays locked in our consciousness as if it had occurred to us. And the ego will use that as an affirmative kind of tool to validate itself and say, look, you're not safe, you're not protected, you're vulnerable, all those things. And the Course is very clear about saying you are invulnerable. What you really are at the level of spirit, the way that you were created by your loving creator, is to be invulnerable. You are timeless. You came from before this place and time, and when you go on, you will transcend it. What most spiritual practices are talking about, and this is what the Course is talking about, is transcending it now. Transcending the limitation of the lie that we are locked into a physical body and that's all that we are. This is so powerful because your ego would love you to believe that. That is point in case for the ego to validate itself. Because the more that the ego becomes aware of you becoming spirit identified as opposed to body identified, the more that it realizes all the layer upon layer upon layer of lies that created the story of your ego, which essentially dies with the body when you drop robes, right? When it's all over and you shed the exterior and your spirit moves on, crosses the bridge, goes to the other side, however you want to say it, that whole story fades. And I think the most sort of strange experience for me when it came to this was when I realized how many millions upon millions upon millions of our ancestors, people on this planet who came before us, are forgotten. There is a very, very small percentage of the people who came to this planet whose lives were documented in biographies, in historical documents and such. The percentage of people who are actually remembered beyond the grave is exponentially small compared to the amount of people who came and they shared the same, affliction essentially that we have, which is we believe ourselves to be these incredibly unique individuals that are so different from everybody else and apart from everybody else with our own unique story. And our ego loves that. It thrives on that stuff. But essentially, our sameness is so much more profoundly, it saturates the fabric of all of our lives than our differences. We both, all of us, in oneness, in wholeness, even though we appear to be quite different in some ways, which is still a very minute percentage of what makes us any different. We are so much alike that the differences are almost like negligible. We breathe the same oxygen. We all must eat. We all must have water. We all must sleep. We all do this on the same exact cyclical kind of schedule. And we all want love, and we all want peace, and we all want a house and, enough wealth to take care of our families. Like all of these things, there's a very, very rare and few people who actually go beyond that and decide that that's not what they want for themselves. Extremely rare. Like monks in monasteries rare, which is what, maybe 0.0001% of the entire population. Most people won't choose that life for themselves because that level of self-denial is so incredibly challenging. So when it really comes down to what the course is about. It's kind of like this monks and monasteries concept. The idea that they are going into this sort of denial of the individuated self in honor of the Most High, because they realize how fleeting this is. And their souls recognize how important it is, not for themselves, but for the whole of humanity, to lead by example. They see the suffering, they see the affliction, and they want to bring people along the journey. And so they go to great lengths of what looks like much suffering to us here on the outside of the monastery walls to prove what it is to be spirit identified. That you don't need all these things that the rest of us out here in what we think is the real world ascribe to, which is the same exact thing. I feel like I'm talking in circles a little bit, but it's a really interesting concept to think that what divides us and seems to separate us is really illusory. And what we really are at our core, what we really want, is connection with Source, is that perfect peace, is that perfect knowing, that perfect memory in our heart and in our soul that denies all of the, extraneous expectations and falsities in life. It's about becoming very identified with the one who sent us, because in your very cellular structure, because we are made in his image, it's in our very cellular structure is the memory of the one who made us. And because we remember it, there will always be that place in us that longs for that connection to be united. And that's a beautiful thought. I will leave you with the closing affirmation one more time. If I feel hurt by someone's actions today, I'll seek another way to see the experience. There is one, always. Thank you for joining me. If you found the video interesting, like, share, subscribe, comment below. I really do appreciate your time and being here with me, with all of us in the collective, as we all come together to uplift, enlighten, and ascend. Bye now.